when the old man laid a silver dollar on the dead tractor's iron seat and said, $1 for the whole thing. Every man in Cora Hensley's yard laughed except Cora. She stood beside the machine with grease to her elbows and a wrench in her fist, the August heat popping the barn roof overhead like distant gunfire. The tractor had died halfway through the south field that morning. Half her wheat still waited under a hard white sky. Gideon Pike had arrived before the engine even cooled, black coat buttoned, boots polished, smile neat as a coffin hinge. His bank hands leaned on the fence grinning. Deputy Wells studied his hat brim. The wind shoved dry chaff against the back of Cora's throat. I offered you 40, Gideon said. Now Mr. Redden here has raised it to $1. Generous of him. Cora looked at the stranger, not Gideon. Amos Redden was broad-shouldered even with the years bending him. Gray sat in his beard and under his hat brim. His hands were black in the creases, mechanic's hands, the kind that had held more broken things than living ones. You making sport of me? Cora asked. No, ma'am. He said it so quietly the laughter thinned. Before we go farther, tell us in the comments where you're listening from tonight. It's good to know who's riding along. Gideon flicked dust from his cuff. Mrs. Hensley has until Monday noon to settle her note. Without that tractor, she doesn't harvest. Without the harvest, she doesn't pay. The bank takes what it's owed. No cruelty in arithmetic. It ain't arithmetic, Cora said. It's theft, said slowly. That earned one short breath of laughter from Amos. Gideon didn't care for it. The deputy cleared his throat. Cora turned just in time to see him unfold a paper he had hoped not to read aloud. Repossession at sunup tomorrow, he said weakly. 1 Heartwarming tractor. 1 drill. 2 harrows. Tomorrow. Cora snapped. Gideon's eyes narrowed. He had not meant that part to surface in the yard. Amos closed his hand around the silver dollar. That's what I'm buying, ma'am. Till morning. If the tractor belongs to me before dawn, he can't hitch it to his claim. I tow it to my place. I work on it through the night. And if I fail, you call me the fool I deserve to be and keep the dollar. Gideon laughed. You can't raise the dead, Amos. Amos finally looked at him. No, but I've embarrassed a fair few undertakers. Cora stared at the machine. Eli's initials were carved under the seat, where only a wife kneeling beside the engine would ever notice. She had spent all morning chasing the fault and finding nothing that made sense. If Gideon took the tractor at dawn, the farm was gone. If she signed it over to Amos Redden, she was trusting a man children watched from behind their mother's skirts, the widower from Mule Creek who spoke to machines more than people. She could take Gideon's offer, keep the house through winter, leave with what dignity fit in a suitcase. Or she could do the harder, madder thing. The wheat in the south field moved under the hot wind like something frightened and alive. Eli used to say land knew when it was being abandoned. Standing there with iron smell on her hands, Cora thought maybe he had been right. Fetch me paper, she said. The bill of sale was written on the hood. Her hand shook once, no more. Amos put the silver dollar in her palm. It was warm from his skin. Gideon's face went waxy with anger. You'll regret this, he said. Cora curled her fingers around the coin. I've regretted knowing you for 2 years. I'm not sure a third will do much worse. Amos chained the tractor behind his battered truck and towed it toward Mule Creek under a copper sunset. Cora watched her last good chance disappear in a storm of dust and realized she had crossed the line between surviving a thing and fighting it. That night the house spoke in every empty sound grief teaches a woman to hear. The kitchen clock ticked. Chinaberry limbs scratched the window. Boards settled with soft little sighs. Cora sat at the table with the silver dollar in front of her and Gideon's warning still in her ears. She did not sleep. She sharpened blades by lantern light. She hid the deed box under a loose board and checked it twice. After midnight, she stood on the porch with a shotgun across her arms and listened to coyotes lifting their thin music from the creek bed. It sounded too much like women keening. At first light, she heard an engine in the distance, low and steady. For one wild second, she thought she had imagined it. Then the tractor came over the rise, running smooth as a hymn. Amos sat behind the wheel, soot under his eyes, one sleeve torn, beard silver in the sunrise. The engine settled into a deep, even pull that Cora felt through the dirt under her boots. He shut it down in the yard and climbed stiffly to the ground, holding out 2 things, a fresh bill of sale transferring the tractor back to Cora for $1, and a clipped metal pin lying in his palm like a tooth. That ain't where, she said. No. He opened the fuel bowl with his pocket knife. Grit lay in the bottom like brown sugar. Neither is that. She looked up slowly. Amos met her eyes. Some things quit because they're worn out. Some things quit because somebody wanted them to. The words moved through her like cold water. Suddenly Gideon's certainty made sense. His eagerness, his timing, his smile. From the road came the rattle of wheels. Deputy Wells arrived with 2 bank hands to seize the tractor and found it running. He stared at the machine, then at the paper in Cora's hand, and said, "Well, I suppose that settles that item." "It surely does," Cora said. They took a harrow and the seed drill instead, smaller trophies for smaller men. Amos watched them go, then asked the question she hated because numbers never lied. "How short are you?" $312.70. "And the south field?" "If I get it cut and hauled before Monday noon, for 100 or better." He nodded once. "Then we don't need a miracle. We need 2 clean days and a little meanness." By noon the story had outrun the dust. Cora had sold herself to Amos Redden. Amos had stolen Pike's collateral. Amos worked under moon signs and graveyard tricks. Mrs. Fenwick brought biscuits in a towel. Mr. Lattimore sent fuel on account. The storekeeper refused her flour on credit, then pushed the sack toward her when she reached the door. Half the county disapproved. The other half was waiting to see if courage might be catching. They started the south field under a sky so blue it looked mean. Cora drove. She had always driven, because she understood engines the way some women understood hymns. But the first hard pull brought Eli's last day back sharp. A loaded wagon, bad brake bands, Gideon calling the note, Eli waving when he should have stopped. The wagon jackknifed on the grate. By the time they pulled him free, his hand was already cooling in hers. Now the vibration climbed through the seat into her spine. Her fingers locked on the wheel. Amos walked beside the furrow and laid one hand on the fender. Not to stop her. Just there. "It's not him," he said. Plain words. Nothing fancy. But kindness sometimes comes in work clothes. Cora let out a breath she had carried for 18 months and eased the tractor forward. By evening they had half the field down. Gideon rode out alone, bay horse neat, coat spotless, as if even dust required his permission. "Still time to be sensible," he called. "Sign the place over tonight. Keep the house till Christmas. Take your chickens. Take the blue dishes your mother left you. After what happened to Eli, I'd call that mercy." At Eli's name, iron flooded Cora's mouth. "What happened to Eli?" she said. "Started every time you came here smiling." Gideon's face stayed smooth. "A widow can't run 80 acres. Everyone knows it. Your neighbors know it. He knows it." The easy road opened under her feet right then. Sign. Surrender. Sleep indoors all winter without counting grain against interest. Let the land go and call it fate. Instead, she stepped close enough that Gideon had to look down at her. "You know what people always mistake about me?" she asked. "They think because I got tired, I got beat." He looked at Amos. "And you? Still collecting broken things?" Amos kept tying twine. "Only the ones that object to being owned by you." Gideon's eyes hardened. "Be careful, Redden. A man with your reputation shouldn't borrow fresh trouble." When he rode off, dust trailed behind him like a promise. That night Amos sat at her kitchen table only after she asked him twice. The screen door ticked as moths hit it. Coffee steamed between them. Up close, Cora saw the scar by his jaw, the burn on one wrist, the way his eyes found the door before comfort. "They say things about you," she said. "They say plenty about most folks. Mine just carries farther." She tore a biscuit and put half on his plate. "You going to tell me which of it is true?" He looked at the biscuit first, like gifts bothered him more than questions. Then he said, "My wife and daughter died 11 years ago on the North Road in a sleet storm. Axle snapped. Team bolted. By the time I found them, the cold had done what cold does. Town decided I should have been there sooner. I decided worse than that. Been repairing wattle sit still ever since." There it was. No defense. No excuse. Just truth laid flat on the table. Cora answered with one of her own. "I was 7 months along when Eli died. Lost the baby 3 days later. Folks brought casseroles and scripture and opinions. Then they went home. I learned grief sounds loud to the person carrying it and faint to everybody else." Amos looked at her with such plain recognition that she had to look away first. They rose before daylight and worked through noon. At the edge of the second day, as they loaded the first sacks for town, Cora watched Amos tie the tarpaulin and wondered how many years a man could carry sorrow before his body started telling it for him. And tell me true, if you had dust on your lips and the whole county talking behind your back, what would you have done in her place? Trusted the man everyone warned you about, or chosen the safer ruin and called it peace? Cora made her answer when she slid over on the wagon board and said, "You take the reins. I trust your eyes in town better than mine." Amos stopped with the rope in his hand. Trust is a common word to the unhurt. To the broken, it can feel like prying open a locked chest with bare fingers. He climbed up beside her without another word. They reached Boise City's grain elevator just before sundown. Men along the boardwalk turned to stare. Women paused with market baskets at their hips. Nothing entertains a small town like a woman refusing the part written for her. The clerk rubbed the grain between finger and thumb, sniffed, and began to write. Then he glanced toward the street and froze. Gideon Pike stood under the bank awning with one hand in his pocket and trouble in his stillness. "We need a ticket now," Cora said. "You'll get paid after final weigh," the clerk muttered. "That wasn't my question." His face reddened. He tore the slip harder than he needed to and shoved it through the window. On the walk back to the wagon, Amos said, "He'll squeeze every step he can. Then we'll walk on his fingers," Cora said. The sun was down by the time they reached the dry wash east of town. The old plank bridge ended in splinters. Amos pulled the team up hard. One broken board still rocked below. Fresh dirt showed where it had been chopped free. "Heard no flood," Cora said. "Didn't need one." They unloaded half the grain and carried sacks by lantern light, one brutal trip at a time. Rope burns striped Cora's palms raw. Dust pasted sweat to Amos's temples. When she stumbled at the cut, he caught her elbow and said, sharper than usual, "You fall in there and I can't harvest and bury you the same night." It was nearly a joke. Nearly enough. By the time the wagon was across, black wind clouds were pushing up from the northwest. Not rain, just dirt and bad temper. When they reached the farm, lantern light glowed in her kitchen window, though she had lit none. The door hung from one hinge. Flour dust tracked the floor. Drawers were yanked out. The deed box lay emptied on the table. Cora dropped to the loose board where she had hidden the note receipts, insurance papers, land abstract. Gone. Amos bent to pick up a page from under the stove and went still. He handed it to her. Across the top, in faded pencil, were the words, "Replace brake band before further load use. Unsafe on grade." Eli's name was signed below, dated 4 days before he died. "You knew?" she whispered. "I warned him," Amos said. His face had stripped older in a breath. "He said Pike was calling the note if he lost another hauling day. I thought he'd nurse it level. I thought. You thought wrong." "Yes." She stood so fast the chair behind her fell. For one blind second, she wanted to strike him, strike Gideon, strike the whole room into splinters. Amos did not defend himself. That made it worse. Then the smell hit. Smoke. They ran into a wind full of sparks. Fire raced through the cut stubble at the far edge of the south field, low and orange and fast. Beyond the flames, Cora saw 3 riders wheeling at the fence line. Lester Vale's white bandana flashed once before he disappeared into the dark. "Get the tractor," Amos shouted. What followed came bright and hard, the way terror always does. Cora cranked the engine. Amos cut the team loose and slapped them toward the north pasture. She dropped the discs and drove along the fire line, steel teeth biting a black strip between wheat and flame. Smoke packed her mouth. Ash whirled around them. A shot cracked from the dark. Metal rang by her ear. Amos jerked on the hitch rail, blood spreading down his sleeve. No room for fear then. Only motion. Another shot. The rear tire hissed. Fire leapt the first break anyway. The lower barn. Amos shouted. 3 wagon loads of sacked wheat waited there. Enough to clear the note if they made town. If the barn went, Monday went with it. Cora swung the tractor hard, and they hit the barn in a storm of cinders. Together they dragged sacks through smoke until the boards burned hot under their boots. Amos shoved the last one up, braced against the wheel, and nearly folded where he stood. "Get on," Cora snapped. "You drive." "I am driving." "You'll need both hands." "I can still sit upright." That was absurd and exactly like him. She caught his soot-blackened face in both hands. "If you die from stubbornness, I'll drag you back and kill you myself." A startled laugh broke out of him. They roared down the lane with the wagon behind them. fire rolling at their backs and gunshots falling away in the wind. At the edge of town, the elevator gate stood chained shut. Gideon Pike watched from the platform, face calm in the fireglow. "No deliveries till morning," he called. "Safety measure." The fire was already running the ditch grass toward town. Folks poured onto porches. The clerk hovered behind the scale house window like a trapped rabbit. Cora felt the old life offer her one last humiliation. "Stop here, plead. Wait for a man to decide whether you were allowed to survive." She spat smoke and shoved the throttle forward. The tractor hit the gate at full pull. Chain snapped. Timber burst. The post sheared at the base, and the whole thing came down in a spray of splinters as iron roared into the yard. For one bright second, every soul in Boise City stood still, watching a widow drive her resurrected tractor through Gideon Pike's locked gate like judgment on steel wheels. Then the town woke. Buckets ran. Men shouted. The clerk flung open the scale house door. Deputy Wells called for the pump crew. And Amos, white from blood loss, folded sideways against Cora as she brought the load to the scale. She caught him before he hit the fender. "Stay with me," she said. His eyes opened once. "Would have liked," he murmured, "to see Pike's face from the front." Then he went limp. They got the grain weighed before midnight because Cora stood in the doorway with soot on her face and said, "If one more man tells me to wait till morning, I'll teach him what gates are for." No one argued. The ticket trembled in her hand when it came. $346.12. Enough. More than enough, if Gideon couldn't steal it between there and sunrise. The doctor stitched Amos in the back room of the mercantile with lamplight, whiskey, and rough hands. The bullet had only furrowed the arm. Lucky, the doctor called it. Cora thought luck ought to wear a kinder face. She sat beside Amos through the rest of the night. Smoke haunted the town air. He woke, once muttering Dinah's name, once with panic in his eyes so raw, she laid her hand flat on his chest before she knew she meant to. "You're here," she said. He looked at her hand as if it were some strange warm bird that had landed there. His breathing slowed. "Near dawn," he said. "You should have left me and taken the ticket to the bank." She shook her head. "I did enough leaving in one lifetime." By first light, they sat at her kitchen table amid swept flour and broken drawers. Between them lay the grain ticket, the clipped pin, and the torn repair order. Cora poured coffee with steady hands. Anger had hardened into something colder, cleaner, more useful. "Tell me all of it," she said. Amos stared at the repair order a long time. "Eli came to me 4 days before he died. Needed the brake band cheap and quick. I didn't have the right width. Told him to wait 2 days for freight. He said Pike was already threatening the note. I could have ridden here. Could have made him listen. Could have told you. But you didn't." "No." Outside, a rooster kept announcing morning to a world that had not earned it. At last Amos opened his good hand. In it was a small oilcloth packet. "Found this under the battery box while I was fixing the tractor." Inside were 2 receipts, an insurance correspondence slip, and an unsigned letter in Eli's hand. The paper was grease-stained, but the meaning was plain. Gideon Pike had held the life insurance draft after Eli's first accident claim came through, and used it to force fresh debt papers across the harvest. Eli had hidden the truth because shame is a crueler jailer than any sheriff. Cora read the letter twice. On the third reading, the room changed shape around her. "I kept thinking bad luck had a better memory than people," she said. "Turns out it was just Gideon. He had your husband hauling on bad brakes," Amos said. "He sat on your money. Then he sent men to cripple the tractor and light your field." Cora lowered the page. "He took my husband, my child, nearly my land, and then came into my yard smiling. Yes, I'm done letting him explain my life back to me." Amos sat with that, then said the smallest and truest thing anyone had given her in years. "You don't owe the dead your whole life, Cora. They asked for your love, not your ruin." She forgot to breathe. No great speech ever lands like a quiet sentence said over chipped cups and smoke-stained walls. That line went clean through her. She reached across the table and turned his cup so the chipped edge faced away from his mouth. He covered her fingers once with his good hand. Warm. Brief. Enough. Then she crossed to the bedroom and returned with Eli's best socket wrench wrapped in flour sack cloth. "He loved this tool," she said. "Wouldn't lend it to saints. I'm lending it to you." Amos took it like a thing blessed and dangerous. "That's serious trust." "Yes," she said. "I know. If this story is finding you right where you live, that's exactly who it was written for. A like and a subscribe tells us to keep bringing you people who choose tenderness without giving up the fight. By 9 o'clock, the whole town knew about the fire, the broken gate, the wounded widower, and the fact that Cora now held enough grain money to beat the note if the bank had any honesty left in it. By 10, folks were drifting toward Gideon Pike's office under the excuse of errands. By 11, even the ones who hated scandal were standing close enough to hear one. Cora wore her black Sunday dress because it made her shoulders look straighter. Smoke marked the hem. She left it there. Amos came with his arm bound in clean cloth and his hat brushed. Deputy Wells stood at the door, looking like sleep had passed him by without stopping. Gideon rose behind his desk when they entered. Mrs. Hensley. Mr. Redden, I trust last night's excitement hasn't clouded your judgment. Cora laid the grain ticket on his blotter. $346.12. Enough to satisfy note 48 and leave me change, assuming your fees are legal and not invented in the night. A flicker crossed his face. The note accelerated. Fire damage to secured crop changes the bank's position. The crop was weighed. After hours. Improperly. Cora laid down the repair order. Then Eli's letter. Then the insurance slip. I brought more paper than you did, she said. Thought I'd give you the family treatment. Gideon's gaze sharpened. Amos spoke. You pushed Eli to haul on bad brakes. You sat on her insurance draft. Then you sent men to cripple the tractor so you could take what was left. Careful, Gideon said softly. Careful what you accuse when you can't prove it. I can prove the bridge was cut with an axe fresh enough to bleed sap, Cora said. I can prove Lester Vale fired on us. Half the town saw the fire chasing his horse. I can prove the tractor was tampered with. And I can prove you had reason enough to do all of it. Motive isn't law. No, Cora said. But theft is. She turned toward the open door. Mrs. Beale, you've kept his books 14 years. Would you care to tell the room when my insurance draft arrived? Old Mrs. Beale froze on the threshold, thread parcel clutched in both hands. Gideon's head snapped around. That's enough, he said. Mrs. Beale stepped inside anyway, spine bent, voice clear. 6 days after Eli Hensley's first hospital bill. Mr. Pike told me not to post it until after harvest refinancing. The room changed. Cora had not known for certain the old bookkeeper would speak. She had only seen the way Mrs. Beale's mouth tightened every time she watched Cora sign another paper she did not fully understand. Sometimes courage is not certainty. Sometimes it is just choosing where to stand and letting other people decide whether they are ashamed to stay seated. Amos set the clipped pin on the blotter. Lester Vale uses fencing nippers with a broken bite on the left jaw. Same crescent cut as this. The blacksmith can tell you so. Might help when the sheriff asks how arson, sabotage, and a gunshot landed in the same night. Deputy Wells swallowed. Sheriff's already asking. From outside came more voices. Lattimore. The elevator clerk. The storekeeper. Each had seen something. Lester buying too much lamp oil. A horse running hard from the south fence. Gideon on the platform while the gate stayed chained. Each fact alone had been a whisper. Together they sounded like judgment. Gideon straightened. You're all forgetting whose credit carried this town through dry years. And whose hand was around our throats while he did it, Cora said. He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time saw the version of her he had been using was gone. Not the widow bent by grief. Not the farmer he could outlast. Not the woman taught to lower her voice in a room owned by men. He saw the one who had driven a tractor through his gate. He made his mistake then. Powerful men often do when the room quits arranging itself around them. He lunged for the papers. Cora was faster. She swept the letter and receipts off the desk the same instant Amos planted his good hand on Gideon's shoulder and shoved him back into his chair. Not a punch. Not much force. Just enough to show every witness in the room that Gideon Pike could, in fact, be moved. Sheriff Bell entered on that image with 2 men behind him. Don't trouble yourself getting up, the sheriff said. Lester Vale lasted less than an hour. Men like Lester leak before they break. First came the bridge. Then the shot. Then the sand in the fuel bowl and the clipped governor pin. By noon the bank lobby sounded like a storm cellar with the doors torn off. Cora did not smile. Justice, when it finally arrives, is too sober a thing for smiling. She watched them take Gideon out through the same front door he had used for years to collect signatures from desperate people. His hat stayed on until the sheriff knocked it into the dust. A small thing, But towns remember small things longer than sermons. By evening, the county examiner had sealed the bank books. By week's end, Gideon's credit line was suspended, his store frozen, and 3 more farmers had come forward with missing receipts and invented fees. Lester traded testimony for a better cot. Gideon Pike got iron bars and a reputation that would not outlive him kindly. Cora paid her note in full 2 days later and stood at the counter until the stamped release was placed directly in her hand. Only then did she leave. The land changed in practical ways first. The charred edge of the south field still bought winter feed and spring seed. The elevator replaced its gate, but folks left the broken post by the fence like a monument. Deputy Wells started meeting men's eyes when he served papers. Mrs. Fenwick brought porch cuttings. The storekeeper struck Cora's flour bill and wrote paid in a firmer hand. And every time Amos came to town after that, fewer children hid behind skirts and more old men tipped hats. The truest change came slower. Amos started appearing at her place without needing an excuse. Some evenings he fixed what did not need fixing. Some evenings he sat on the porch while Cora snapped beans into a bowl and the dusk went rose-colored over the stubble. Silence with him no longer felt empty. It felt like 2 wounded people giving each other room to heal. One frosted October evening, she found him standing by Eli's grave with his hat in both hands. "I should have come sooner," he said to the stone. But shame walks slower than weather. Cora said nothing until he turned. The old reflex to apologize rose in his face and died there when she shook her head. "You already told him with your work," she said. They walked home side by side through silver grass. At the porch steps he stopped. "I don't know how to do this pretty," he said. "What is this? This part where a man says your company is dear to him, and your house feels more like home than any place has in years." The evening smelled of cold earth and wood smoke. Somewhere far off, a cow lowed. The last light held just enough to make him look younger than grief had any right to leave him. "Good," Cora said. "I've got no patience left for pretty." He laughed then, fully, helplessly, like surprise had reached clear through him, and the sound went through her like warm water over frozen hands. Their first kiss happened on the porch with no thunder, no music, no witness but the cooling field and a bucket of beans. Amos stood one step below her, asking with his eyes what his mouth still did not trust itself to say. Cora laid her hand against the scar by his jaw and answered yes before the question was finished. It tasted of coffee, cold air, and the kind of relief people mistake for sorrow because it brings tears with it. By winter he had moved only a shaving kit, 2 shirts, and Dinah's cast-iron skillet into the house, but the rooms knew. Grief still lived there. So did memory. But neither was master anymore. By spring, Gideon's store had been sold to a cooperative of local families. Mrs. Beale kept the books. The bank reopened under new management with less velvet and more honest ink. Lester went to state prison and learned that men who burn crops for hire are seldom missed by neighbors. The south field greened again, not because the world had turned kind, because 2 stubborn people had refused to let cruelty decide the final shape of their lives. It was June when Amos asked proper. Not in town, not on a holiday, just by the repaired gate at sunset with young wheat whispering and the tractor idling nearby, as if it had stayed to witness what it had started. He took a plain gold ring from his pocket, recast by the blacksmith from Dinah's band, into something new enough not to lie about the past. "I got 1 life left," he said. "It's a better one with you in it. If you can bear a man who's late to most things, but means this on time." Cora slipped the ring onto her finger. "You were exactly on time." They married in the yard that nearly ended her. Mrs. Fenwick cried openly. Deputy Wells cried privately behind the truck. Even the storekeeper came with a pie and the discomfort of a man unpracticed in joy. Cora wore blue. Amos shaved his beard shorter. When the preacher asked who gave the bride, Cora answered before anyone else could. "I kept myself," she said. "He just knew what I was worth." Years later, folks still told the story of the dollar tractor as if it were about tricking a banker. It wasn't. It was about a woman who had confused endurance with fate and a man who had punished himself so long he no longer believed he belonged in daylight. Sometimes the thing that saves your life arrives looking too small to matter. A coin in a palm, a quiet sentence at a kitchen table, a gate somebody told you not to hit. And maybe this is the line worth carrying home. A good life doesn't always come back the way it was taken. Sometimes it comes back louder, rougher, and braver, asking whether you finally got room on the porch. On a July evening 3 summers later, children chased lightning bugs between the rows while bread cooled on the sill, and the tractor sat under fresh paint the color of deep meadow grass. And Cora, barefoot on the porch with Amos's warm hand around hers, watched the wheat bend gold clear to the horizon like the whole wounded earth learning at last how to forgive the light. Next time, we'll tell the story of a deaf seamstress sent away to a mountain cattle camp because her brothers called her a burden, until the scarred ranch cook who spoke to no one began leaving carved messages where only she would find them.